too long, you deliver me. You deliver me.
I don't know about you, but that's hard to watch. Last night they were replaying the live footage from that morning, and I felt the punch in my gut just like it was that day. It's really hard to understand any of what happened. We can't in our own power. As it said from 1 Corinthians in that one day we will have a clear understanding of everything, but right now we don't. So what was your place that they talked about, that spot? I remember a man named Officer Bryan Baker. I was at work at Sunnyside Middle School, and he said, "You need to come see this." And we watched the beginning of what would change our lives that morning together, just the two of us. I wouldn't even remember Bryan Baker today if it weren't for that day. And just a few years ago, I saw Bryan again, and the first thing he said to me when I ran back when I came across him at a restaurant, he looked at me and said, "We were together on the morning of September 11th. It connects us. It changed us. Forgiveness that day seemed impossible. And maybe for you, it still is. But what does the Bible say about forgiveness? Peter was talking to Jesus and said, "Lord, how often should I forgive someone?" In Matthew 18, 7 times? And Jesus' response was, "No, not 7, but 70 times 7. Now, the part that we don't know about this, or some of us don't know, is that Jewish tradition said that they should forgive in the Jewish tradition 3 times. So Peter thought he was being generous by forgiving 7. What Jesus' response was, in essence, saying was not 490 times, which is a lot. He was saying there isn't a number, because what Peter was suggesting is that even though he was being generous in his forgiveness, that there was no number attached to that. There's another tragedy that happened. On October 6th, Charles Carl Roberts put his own children on the school bus. He kissed them goodbye and then drove to a small Amish schoolhouse in his community. He went into this is the schoolhouse. He went in, barricaded the doors, released the boys and the pregnant women. And then he said aloud, "I am mad at God and need to take revenge on some Christians." We only know that because some of those girls that were left survived, but 5 of them were taken by his gun, and then he took his own life. Why was Charles Carl Roberts angry? It's widely believed that he was angry because he had lost a daughter shortly after she was born. And his solution in his warped mind was to take the life of others' daughters. And so in this Amish community, they were completely devastated on October 6th of 2006. But there's a whole lot more to this story. You might think that the newspaper articles that would follow were about the gunman and about what happened and what led up to that time. And there were stories about that, but most of the stories, thousands and thousands of them, and even a book called Amish Grace, was written not about the gunman, but about the response of the community in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The Amish community not only forgave the family and embraced them, both literally and symbolically, but they forgave the gunman. That forgiveness so astonished the news media that they clamored to get any information from these people who had forgiven in a time that would seem for most of us unforgivable. In response to a reporter that accused the community and this particular Amish person of making all of it up, making all of the forgiveness up, even if not making it up, inflating it so that their community would look better. An Amish girl responded, she was just taken aback by it, and said, "We have to forgive. We have to forgive him in order for God to forgive us." Was it a struggle for that community? You bet. It was a struggle. They may be different in the way they live from us. They may seem to be more dedicated than we are to certain things, but they are still human. It was a struggle. I got a story, the Amish put a flaw into everything that they do intentionally. Not that they think that if they didn't, they wouldn't, that the piece, the furniture, the building, whatever it was, would be perfect, but they intentionally honor God by saying, we know that we are not perfect, and they intentionally place a flaw into anything that they construct, build, or do. So it shouldn't be any surprise to you the response to this next question. A reporter was standing again in a group of people from that community and said, "Do your people ever ask why God let this happen to you, to us?" And the man's response was immediate. "Yes, probably 1,000,000 times." There's a popular book that is entitled, "All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten." You ever heard of it? If you haven't, this book suggests that all the things you need to know that really matter in life were on your kindergarten report card. The practical teaching of our kindergarten teachers is really important in shaping who we are as people. But it's a different evaluation system, and so as a former teacher, I know for you to understand the lesson of what we're talking about, you should probably see the key. So I want to review the rigorous standards from our kindergarten years. There's no A, B, C, D, or F. We don't have to worry about that, but let me tell you, these were no less serious if you remember back to that time. You had E. Everybody strove for that E, or at least the S+. I don't know about you, but anytime I got S with a plus after it, chest puffed up a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I got an S+. There's the S, which is satisfactory, and that was, I'm not going to get in trouble at home. But then there was the dreaded U. The dreaded U, the unsatisfactory. That was the one that said that I was going to have a talk with not just Mom, but wait till your father gets home. Well, I never got anything over you in one particular area. I want you to read this with me. Talks too much. I get an unsatisfactory in that area every time. I always talk too much in class, but it was so much more fun to talk to my neighbors than to have to be quiet. My wife can't completely relate with this. She's a pretty quiet person. Sometimes you see the pretend outgoing person, but that's why she carries her little knitting bag and she disappears into it, because she doesn't understand this. Well, we'll get to hers. And maybe yours. I was always jabbering, and in today's verse, Jesus continued after talking about how many times to forgive. Before Peter had a chance to even think about it or respond, he shared the parable of a king. The king was settling accounts with his servants, those that were in debt to him. And he went through several and came upon one that owed him, in the Bible, in biblical times, 10,000 talents. So what is 10,000 talents? Some translations of the Bible say 10,000 talents is $1 million. And that's a good translation. That's a lot of money. Wouldn't you agree? But literally, 10,000 talents translates to around $4 billion in today's money. This isn't just your everyday loan, is it? But what we find if we search further, in the culture of the time, 10,000 talents was about the biggest number they had a word for. And so that's the demonstration, I believe, in this verse of our debt to God for our salvation. There's no limit on it. It's bigger than any number we can comprehend. Well, the man was unable to pay that debt. And so the king, ordered the man, his wife, and children to be sold to repay that. The man begged for mercy. He said, "Please be patient with me, and I will pay it all." We already talked about that being a ridiculous amount. But I think that what this is doing is saying that there's only one that has the power for us to overcome that debt. I can just imagine that servant on the ground begging for forgiveness. "I promised I will pay it all," after knowing that it's $4 billion, which is going to be impossible to pay all of. And he just kept jabbering and begging and pleading. And I can imagine the king going, "Oh, please, just be quiet."
When the road is winding, way too